Today, I'm excited because I got Nick Rossi on the show. He has one of the most unique backgrounds I've come across.
It sparked like wildfire. Once it was one, it went to the next, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting in with architectural meetings and we're finding out how we can put 60 units on this property. And I mean, this shit's all over my head, right? And then I would go home and just dive into research, man, because I don't like not knowing.
Yeah, it seems like you definitely consistently take action. And I think that's one of the most important things for any successful entrepreneur or business owner.
And I think one of the other things is you create your opportunities.
So knowing what you know now, having built this business, would you rather start a business from zero or to purchase an underperforming one?
So I was actually in the process. We were in escrow and we pulled out.
What's the biggest piece of advice for someone who's looking to get in hotels that doesn't have any experience with short-term rentals or single family? Do you think it's possible to go straight to hotels, or do you think they have to start with something smaller first? All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Lowdown. Today, I'm excited because I got Nick Rossi on the show. He has one of the most unique backgrounds I've come across. We both met in a hotel investing community that we're both a part of. And he started off working on Tugboats as a chief engineer up in Alaska, and then has made the jump into real estate. Since then, he's renovated multiple properties, built a construction company, scaled a coding business across multiple states, and is now looking to purchase a hotel. I'm excited to dig into his journey and see what we can unpack. So Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, my man. Stoked to be a part of it.
Thanks, dude. So I've never met anyone who has done the tugboat kind of stuff. So can you just take us back to what life looked like while working on those boats?
Man, it was, looking back now, I valued the experience and the time. It was a pretty tough and fun industry to be in. I lived in San Diego and would commute back and forth to work. We would work about 70 days on, 60 days off out in Western Alaska and Dutch Harbor, St. Paul, Naknek area. And it was like marine construction and logistics. We would take containers and we would facilitate the villages so that way they had everything they needed. And then I worked a shuttle run up there in Alaska. So I would fly up to Dutch Harbor, and then I would get on the boat and then go from Dutch Harbor to St. Paul, which is like, everybody knows St. Paul is the deadliest catch area. That's where all the guys bring in all the crab. So we would go back and forth there all winter. And I chose to work in the wintertime because of a little bit more money. But it was a blast, man. And then moved down into Long Beach. I ran an excavator on a barge. We dredged like the Oakland area, some marinas. And that was just, it was a kick-ass thing, man. It was tough work, though. It was 12-hour days for 7 days a week for 4 weeks straight. So you definitely learned how to, put your head down and grind. And then ultimately, the last straw for me was 220 days at sea for that year. Not combined, but, broken up. And so I found a lapse, and I was like, you know what? I got to find something on land and make it work. And I was eager, and the work ethic, I think, really drove most of this home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very badass career, and I imagine that there's all kinds of like dangerous things that occur. Like, were there any like moments where you felt like a crazy accident could have happened, or did you see any colleagues like go through any injuries?
Unfortunately, too many to speak of. One of the last years I worked there, we lost a friend who got crushed in between a barge. A captain fell off a barge in Nome and unfortunately passed away. My relief engineer lost a hand. His relief engineer lost part of his hand. So between a crane accident, I injured my shoulder, ripped a bicep tendon, landing a barge on a buoy. So yeah, it was all too often that we saw incidences, and it was a union job. I was part of the Longshoremen Union. It was as safe as it could be, being that industry. They took precautions. There was always two guys to a barge landing and handling lines because the ship's lines are huge. You're in rough seas, right? You're in the middle of Alaska. There's nothing that's safe about it. There's nothing that's predictable. You can forecast as much as possible, but shit happens, man. And
yeah,
we just got to watch our backs.
Dude, I'm so sorry to hear about your friends. I imagine that was really, really challenging to deal with. So I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that. But yeah, that sounds incredibly crazy. So when was the moment that you were like, fuck this, I got to go into real estate or do something else?
2017, I took off. I left the tugboat industry. After all of that, I took a year and traveled, lived in Australia for a few months, and then just kind of traveled Southeast Asia. And then when I landed back in Oregon, we were there just to kind of land our feet back on the ground and met a developer who did multifamily development. And we hit it off. I worked with him for about a year and a half, and he taught me pretty much everything there was in that aspect. And I kind of adapted the work ethic and the construction background. Once I got a taste of it, man, it was like full speed ahead. I was like, this is it. I love numbers. I love exercising my brain. There's always an aspect that I feel like I'm learning, which is great because like in the tugboat industry, you can learn and see a lot, but you're still in the four walls of a tugboat, right? So
Mm.
like you travel the world, you see the West Coast. I've been to Hawaii on a boat. I've been to Western Alaska. Like it's great. But here, man, it's like consistently exercising my brain. I'm learning shit new all the time. And working there for about a year and a half, moved back down to San Diego, started a construction company, and I went full speed ahead. Bought a property right away and took that knowledge and still friends with this guy today. And we're actually looking at possibly doing a deal in Cheyenne, Wyoming for industrial. But yeah, I'm stoked, man.
Nice. Well, it sounds like he was the very first big mentor that you had. So, how did that conversation go as far as just like having no experience in this, and then now all of a sudden trying to work for him? Were you just like, I'll work for free for you? Because I know in the beginning for me it was challenging to try and find mentors, so I was just reaching out to people, being and just trying to provide as much value as possible to people, and saying, you know what, honestly, I will work for you for free, as long as I can just like learn from you and just absorb as much information from you as possible. So, what did that look like for you with this guy?
It's kind of a crazy story, but we were only going to be in Oregon for about a month. That's where I'm originally from. And so I applied for a job because I just couldn't sit still. And I applied for this maintenance position as a building engineer. This is the gentleman that owned it. I went and met him in the office downstairs, and he just went through my background. He seemed like a pretty cool cat. And he's like, yeah, why don't you start, next week? And I was like, cool. I'm not going to be here very long, so I'll get you going on. He just did a 1031 exchange and bought this building. So he was like trying to get this thing underway, get some new tenants in there. And about a month went by, and it was going really well. So all these little things he wanted done, I was able to get done. And he's like, man, why don't you just start an LLC and I'll just pay you 1099. And I was like, okay, cool. And so he kind of showed me the ropes on how to do the LLC. So then that's when that started to ignite. And then he's like, well, can you do the drywall? And I was like, sure. Yeah, we can do the drywall. So we did the drywall to repair, and then it evolved from there, like one by one. And as a matter of fact, I actually started an LLC called Nick Does It LLC as a joke because he kept asking me like, well, can you do this? And can you do this? And I was like, yeah. So when he saw the first invoice, Nick Does It, it was just kind of a riot. We thought it was pretty funny. And it sparked like wildfire. Once it was one, it went to the next, went to the next. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting in with architectural meetings and we're finding out how we can put 60 units on this property. And I mean, this shit's all over my head, right? But I'm trying to be a sponge and absorb it. And so we would, be in the car back, and he just took me under his wing. So like he would explain what we just went through. And then I would go home and just dive into research, man, because I don't like not knowing. So I would at least
Mm.
like investigate what it was that we went through. So we would hyper focus on some of those areas. And that was really how it kind of started, and then just grew from there.
Nice. Yeah, it seems like you definitely just consistently take action. And I think that's one of the most important things for any successful entrepreneur or business owner is just the ability to take action quickly and just learn from those mistakes or learnings that may occur, and which is something that you did.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things is you create your opportunities. The boat that I'm on right now, I always wanted a boat. I've owned boats since I was a kid, and kind of like a wild tangent, but this led me to the next developer I worked for in Oregon. I bought this boat, needed to move it to a different marina, and we found a marina in Portland, and this guy was remodeling this marina and then had an apartment that he wanted to get done. So when we land, we're just kind of bullshitting, talking about the place, and he finds out I'm in construction, asked me to put a bid on this. It was really cool, man. It was this old cannery on stilts on the Columbia River. Used to be, right? Well, where the
Mm-hmm.
ice storage was, we converted into an apartment. It was a one-bedroom apartment, beautiful kitchen. We used the old plank flooring that had basically all the ice on it. It was still in good shape. And then once we got done with that, he asked me to help him with a development project for the entitlement process. We were working with the Army Corps of Engineers. All the municipalities in Portland, this thing was below the flood level plain. So there was a bunch of restrictions. And he's like, why don't you be the project manager on this and then help me with the other entitlements? Because at the meanwhile, I'm working 1099 with the other guy on a project basis. And so that helped both. So I learned commercial, and then I kind of learned on the back end on the residential side of things, because he did raw land entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
So you create your opportunities, man. Like you talk to people, you find out what's going on, and you offer value. And if there's value to somebody, right? Like, I'm not asking for money. We're not asking for education. Like, indirectly, you're getting education because you're around the right people. And as one of the gentlemen speaks all the time in our group is, you got to be in the right rooms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, everything in real estate and business is all relationship based, and it's clear that you really developed all these relationships early on, provided as much value as possible, and in return, the universe and these guys give you all these opportunities to learn and do more things.
Yeah,
So,
it very much is the fact too.
so before your first multifamily deal, did you start the construction business first, or did you have the multifamily and then go into the construction? Like, I'm just trying to figure out that order of like when you started each business.
Yeah, so I took the construction company that I had in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
One of the gentlemen that I hired to build the sixplex that we got entitled in Portland had some work going on throughout California and Sacramento. So I told him, I was like, hey, I'm moving to San Diego. I'll start up an area down there for you. And so then we did. And then we captured, and that's when I started the specialty coatings company. And then we captured a lot of that stuff, and then kind of went from Sacramento to San Diego to Arizona, and just bounced around from there. And we still have that. We still operate in 5 states today. And that's what brought me down and like kind of sparked that part of the construction company. And that's been the
Mm-hmm.
driving force, right? So like, I always wanted to get into multifamily, but knew I needed to be able to really control the construction cost.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we had that, we bought the first multifamily property.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I mean, having the construction background is like one of the biggest important pieces for any kind of development or real estate deal. And so having that direct control, like you said, is a huge way to manage costs and make sure everything runs smoothly, making sure the timeline is good and all that stuff, which is so vital to everything. So what do you think is the biggest challenge people overlook, like when managing contractors? Like,
Defining scope of work and expectations. Like, still to this
mm,
day, I have that same issue with contractors. And I will always have that issue with contractors, because whatever you don't explain, no matter how thorough you are, that gap will find
mm-hmm,
itself in the situation you're working on. Um, you want to work with guys that have a good understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, and that have like goals that are aligned. If you're
mm-hmm,
looking for a guy that's hurting for money and just wants to get the job done, he's probably not the right guy for you, because he's going to take all the shortcuts, bypass the things that need to get done, and just kind of expedite his process.
mm-hmm,
You really want to just define the scope of work, write it all down, what you want to get done, what finishes you want done, how you want the things installed. Always include the timeline. Make sure that there's a process for like change orders. Don't mess that up. Like, hey, if you have a change order, you have to have it approved prior to, and an explanation on why that change order wasn't in your scope of work. So if it's like we dug something up and found termite damage, well, that's behind the walls. You can't expect that. But if you messed up on your bid and missed like 500 square feet of drywall because you did your plans wrong, I'm not going to make you eat it. But ultimately, that has to be like a defining factor. Like, hey, yes, I made a mistake. There's something there. But you have to be able to count on that and that process. And one of the other ones is make sure like your draw schedule or your financial process is put together properly, because these guys will just
mm-hmm.
hit you up on a Thursday and be like, hey, I'm done. I need the money. And
Yep.
we have a process that on Fridays we do our invoicing. if we can, for the most part, try to stick to that. So that way there's like a structure and you're not just constantly sending money out every day.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that because communication is everything with contractors, everything alone, and then just also having everything in writing and in contract, because a handshake deal, contractors can say things, but as you alluded to, things can go completely wrong with change orders, draw schedules, and all that stuff. So just really, really make sure that everything is in writing.
Yeah. And it goes both ways, right? Like the customer has to have their shit together. Like
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I'm even guilty for, right? So like tile for the backsplash, I picked out a little bit late on one of our projects. Well, that goes on me. That's not the contractor. The contractor's there to install. He wants to put his stuff together. I try to make sure that most of my materials are delivered, or there's a common understanding of who's going to get the materials. I'll pay for finished materials, things that are visible to the eye and that you can, see as the finished surfaces. But ultimately, they're responsible for everything that takes to get there. So like the thin set, the backer board, things like that. But yeah, you got to have a schedule of values and your finishes picked out. And at least like I'll put together an Excel sheet and I'll put a link to everything. So that way they understand like the installation method too. Like, hey, this is a 30-inch vanity with a one hole sink, right? So then that way they know, like they're prepared that there's a one hole sink or the faucet's there, and they have an understanding of that. It's kind of funny because as you're doing this, you would think one of my favorite sayings is, don't save the produce when the ship is sinking. And I apply that to one of the things in our recent project in Point Loma. We're currently framing the building, right? And we're putting
Mm-hmm.
light fixtures in and we're putting arches in and things like that. But we have to know the exact size of the vanity because we're putting an arch in. And you wouldn't think that as you're doing the framing that the vanity has to be purchased, right? So you got to secure
Mm-hmm.
this vanity. It's kind of like saving the produce when the ship is sinking. There's a lot of other shit that's going on. You got rough and electrical, rough and plumbing, but yet there's a vanity going in. So you
Mm-hmm.
you got to kind of have all that stuff picked out as early as possible.
Yeah, totally. I always tell people with contractors, you can only choose 2 attributes of maybe 3 or 4. So it's like speed, price, quality, communication. Do you think it's possible to have all 4 or all 3?
No, I mean, shit, even 2 is hard to ask for, right? I think in all honesty, communication is probably my biggest one. Um,
Mm,
Communication in and clarity as far as scheduling. A lot of these guys, and I commend them for it, but they struggle with bandwidth. They'll obligate or promise to a schedule, and then they have another project going on and something goes wrong, and then you're kind of left in the background. As long as you communicate with me, right, being the key factor, then I can have the plumbing guy come in your place. Instead of you tell
mm,
me tomorrow you'll start, and then the next day you'll start, and then the next day. Okay, great.
mhm,
Hey, I appreciate that you're honest and you're not going to be there till Monday. Don't do that again. Like we have a schedule, but then I can pivot and I can have the next guy come in, or something else can happen in the meantime, or we can iron some details out. And then, yes, of course, speed is great, but speed comes with a heavy cost. I always feel like somebody that's quick ends up skipping a process and costs more money at the end, right? So like
mm,
they're just quick to frame something in, and then that's not the right area, or the dimensions are not right. And because you're trying to like rapidly go through this, if you're fast, you're expensive, because that means you've come with a lot of experience and efficiency. Otherwise, your speed is worthless because you've put the shit in the wrong spot, right?
mhm.
I had my duplex built in 6 days, vertical, all framing done,
Holy shit.
right? So
That's
we
fast.
did both units and the roof in 6 days. That same framing crew, super experienced, took 10 days on my remodel in Point Loma. Totally different process. Understanding their knowledge on remodels, I would have had a different remodel crew come in and do that framing versus the new construction crew. So there's some like multi-layer aspects to it as well.
Mhm. Got it. Okay. That totally makes sense. How do you balance, I mean, with all your background in construction, how do you balance doing a lot of the work yourself versus hiring out, like working in the business versus on the business?
So At
especially with your own
first,
projects?
yeah, at first I thought like because I can do this stuff, I'm going to save money and do it. And then I realized I'm the worst person in my company to do the projects. I'm the slowest. I have the most bottlenecks. My phone's ringing all the time. So like I try to do something, I get pulled away, and then I'm slowing the guys down behind me. Like I'm the worst contractor known to man because I'll never get my shit done. So ultimately, with that being said, I have to understand that if I utilize my skill set and lay out everything and make it as clear as possible, I get to help create the efficiency as if I was in their place. And then they
Mhm.
get to use their skill set to finish off wherever it is. And ultimately, if we get to a working relationship and find out that he doesn't need that process, great, he goes on his way. Um, we have a team, we have project management software, and even with all of that, man, it is still a chore to put everything together. I think construction is in a fast-paced industry. If you're doing multiple projects, you're a fireman. You're constantly doing
Mhm.
fire drills. There's shit
Mhm.
going on at each project. Somebody needs something right away. It's always time sensitive because somebody didn't plan ahead. Even though you have all of your shit picked out, there's something that happens every single day.
Yeah, for sure. So do you guys only do commercial or do you guys do residential also for the construction side?
For the painting company, we pretty much stick to commercial. We'll do some residential stuff, but we're in probably one of the most competitive markets in the industry in Southern California for painting. We can't
Mhm.
compete with, residential pricing. However, our pricing on commercial is pretty inexpensive, but it's economy and scale. The larger square footage that we have, we try to stay around $1.10 a square foot if we can. 20,000 square feet in exterior and under, we're right around $1.10 a square foot.
Mhm.
Um, but when it comes to residential, it's like 275 to $3 a square foot because you're only painting 2,500 square foot house. So
Yeah.
a guy can come in and easily knock that out for $1.50 because he's got a truck and it's just him and it's good money. So we try to stick to commercial, and it's also just relationships and volume. Right? We get an opportunity to meet with property management companies, and we keep a consistent relationship.
Got it. How did you learn to even just like run the business? Because going from the tugboat, I mean, you're not really operating everything to now doing the business stuff. Is it just from those two mentors that you had, or
A lot
like
of
did you
fucking
just learn
bruises,
it
man.
all? Yeah.
A lot of bruises. Um, I feel like you can plan ahead as much as possible. Having a mentor is one thing, it gives you some foresight and education, but the daily aspects of business, I was never prepared for. And it's still a
Hmm.
learning process to this day as far as hiring and, scope of work and workflow. I feel like you get to a point and you're at like six figures in revenue, and then you get to seven figures in revenue, and there's all these bottlenecks, and you don't know until you get there. Like you can be told a million times over again, like, oh, you've got to have these SOPs in place in order to go to the next step. And you hear it online all the time. Once you're in it, you find your bottleneck, you find your rock, and then you've got to kind of educate yourself. So now I've like looking for a business coach, and I've been able to consistently go that route, but it's every day, it's something new, and it's education. I used to tell the guys on the tugboat, if you think you know everything, you died. It's,
Yep.
you meet these guys that just like they know everything, they don't need to learn anything. I will always be a sponge because you just got to learn from your mistakes for one, and quote unquote failures, which I feel like failures are just kind of an opportunity at that moment to learn how to fix it. And once you fix it, then it's a success. So yeah, constant evolution of,
Trial by
yeah,
fire.
exactly, man.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, before I started in real estate, I was just reading books, listening to podcasts as much as I could, and I honestly probably could have read a million books, but nothing would have prepared me ever for that first flip. I mean, everything that could have went wrong. And so, just to your point, it's like you just got to do the thing, make some mistakes, reflect on it, grow, and then keep going, and just keep repeating that over and over and over again. And that's how you um, build success.
Yeah. And like documenting the process is hugely important. You get into the thick of it and you think, okay, I'm going to learn from this. But the next thing hits you so fast, you don't write it down or something happens. And then all of a sudden but at least you still know what to look out for. You may not have
Mm,
corrected the process, but now and then after repetition and repetition, you start to have your contract lined out. You start to have your forecasting lined out. You kind of start to understand like who you should have there. Like virtual assistants are the key to our company. They help with a lot of the logistics behind the scenes that bog you down. Um, and then having somebody in person is great, depending on the scale or the size of your company. It just really helps to be able to delegate. I think as you get to a certain position, you're just delegating. That's all. Like
hmm.
most of it ends up becoming just delegation.
Yeah, for sure. How many employees do you currently have, and like how much projects do you manage? Like, I'm just trying to get an idea of like what kind of numbers the business is pulling.
Yeah, so we have a full-time crew in San Jose, full-time crew in Sacramento. Full-time meaning about 7 months a year.
Mm,
Um, 5 months a year in Phoenix, and then San Diego crew is about a five-man team W2, and we're busy all year.
got it. Okay,
So we have
nice.
about four crews individually, and then we branch from there.
Okay. And then what kind of, you don't have to give like the exact numbers, but like what kind of profit margins do like a painting company make? Because I'm just kind of curious, like why painting over other trades within general contracting?
Yeah, painting does have a good profit margin. I mean, we usually sit around the 30% range. Depending on certain projects and scale, we'll do a little bit more. But what I
Mm, got
found
it.
in painting, and one of the things that I learned, anytime a contractor tells me they can do everything, I put the brakes up and I
Mm,
ask, even with employees, like, what is your favorite thing to do? What do you like to do the most? Because that's generally what you're going to be the best at. I focused on painting primarily because it's a skill set that our company is good at and we can train it and we do the same thing over and over again. So our scalability and our efficiency grows. So once we're doing the same thing over and over again, we can adapt and grow and grow and grow versus like we throw another thing on. Now we're either hiring subcontractors or we've got to train W2 guys. And if you get a really good guy, you want to grow that company. What if that good guy leaves? So you got to like start over from square one, and picking one trade and hyper focusing on it allows you just to have that same efficiency.
hmm. Yeah, it kind of goes back to real estate too. It's just like really just focus on one thing instead of getting that shiny object syndrome, get really freaking good at it, and then diversify.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we hear all the time. Like you see all over social media, is like what you just said. Get really good at one thing and just keep going. And every time I go somewhere else, it's not like we do bad. It's just we got to learn all over again, right? So now we've got to run into those mistakes. We got to find the right materials. We got to find the right process and the scheduling. Like this way, we just know exactly. I know exactly how long it takes us to paint stuff within a day or two. I know how much material I'm going to use. I know my profit margin. I know our process. I know our estimating. That's another one too, is like spending time behind the computer estimating is a bog down. So if you have a system and you're done by square foot and linear foot, it just makes that process a lot easier.
Hmm. So knowing what you know now, having built this business, would you rather start a business from zero or just purchase an underperforming one?
So I was actually in the process. We were in escrow with another painting company in Orange County with a couple members from our hotel group actually. And we pulled out, and it was a great learning lesson. And after looking at a few different companies, I think it's the same, in my opinion, as looking at some of these more tired hotels. Right
Mm,
now, I think the prices, because quote unquote trades companies are so hot and being sold so frequently, if you don't have a lot of really clear laid out systems and sales, the company to me is based on business relationship and the owner. And as soon as that owner leaves, that business is worthless unless you can pick
mm,
up that relationship and grow from it. But generally, the person that he's best relationships with in that company, they're probably around the same age and they're going to both retire around the same time. So then you're kind of starting over from square one. I saw high prices and low profit margins. And so I
mm,
decided at this point, growing my company. However, not all that is the same everywhere. There still is some good businesses out there, and we would probably love to fold a couple in the near future, but we'll kind of see how that goes. maybe some of these will get bought up and ran wrong, and we'll be able to snatch them up for a good price.
Yeah. Whenever you're purchasing a business like that, do they ever give you like their book of business or their like client base, or is it typical that they just like take it all with them?
No, so, and then that's another contract term too. So when you buy a business, you have their CRM, you have all of their previous business. And one of our requirements when we were going to buy this company is that we get introduced to their clients, and that particular owner stays on board for 6 months to a year. Not like working in the business, but just, making sure that that relationship is maintained and evolved. And then there's a conflict of interest, right? So we make sure that there's a no compete clause, which is, only enforceable so much. But we want to make sure that they're not starting a company or that their son is starting a company somewhere else doing the same exact thing.
Got it. Makes sense. Crazy. That's awesome. Well, I want to switch up gears really quick and then just go into your first multifamily deal. I know you have these amazing businesses, but I really, really want to hear about your first deal because everyone says the first deal is the hardest. So maybe walk me through where you found it, how you found it, all that stuff.
Man, that is the absolute truth that the first deal is the hardest. When I bought this deal, as far as financing goes and like buying the deal, it was hot. I bought it in 2021. Financing was relatively easy. We got a good price. We got a killer interest rate. So like I can't really say to that end, but buying this home, there was two individual single family homes there. We learned the eviction process on the first rental. So that was a little tough. Learning lesson. The gentleman that lived in that house was a super nice guy, but just tough times. And so we learned the process, and thankfully it wasn't a horror story. But the house we lived in, we ended up renovating. And at this time, our construction company's growing. And this was where I was talking about like, oh, I'm doing this stuff. My house was miserable, right? And at the time, I was actually going to get ready to have back surgery. I had a collapsed disc between all 5S1. And so dealing with that, like in the pain between all of it, like trying to get the stuff done, it just prolonged that whole thing, man. I lived in that house and just wanted to move out right away. But it was just a tough process altogether, like growing a construction company, trying to renovate your house, being in construction, coming home to construction, like not desirable at all. But
for sure.
yeah, it was a learning lesson altogether. And learning how to navigate the construction process when you're personally funding it as well is challenging.
Mm-hmm. So this first deal, you said it was two properties on one, or is it like a duplex?
Yeah, so there's two single family homes on one APN.
Okay. And is this the one that you putting the other duplex on, like developing, or is this just...
exactly. And another part of the learning lesson in real estate is when I bought that house, I was W-2, and from there I went 1099 because I was getting hit on taxes too hard, and thought that was like the best case scenario. And then learning that I couldn't even get a HELOC, even though we had a ton of equity. So we had to restructure our company to make sure that it fit the build. And you got to pay to play one way or the other. So, but yeah, that is the property. We're building 2 more units. There was a perfect spread. When I bought this place, it was strategic, which came from the experience of the other guys that I worked with. That property was a 6,000 square foot lot. And I had some non-negotiables. I didn't want to build an asset that I didn't feel was a good asset and that I could, ultimately feel like I could live in myself. So we made sure there was parking and all the things. So there was plenty of space for us to build 2 more units. So ultimately being a 4-unit property. And we're about done. I think we're going to be done with that next month with all of our finishes. So that'll be a 4-month ground up construction project.
Damn, that's badass. So what do the numbers look like? What did you purchase it for? I guess what were the renovation costs? How much went into the duplex, and like how much are you cash flowing now?
Yeah, so I bought the property for $830,000. We did 3.5% down, which I loved all that, right? So we did FHA, primary occupancy, and we put about $150,000 in. I would say that was probably like where we may have went wrong a little bit because we lived in the property. So like we made it a little bit like we put turf and did all kinds of landscaping. Like it's beautiful, don't get me wrong. And I think landscaping is overlooked. But then after we were done with both units, the property appraised for 1.28 million. So we
Nice.
did a HELOC, pulled out 305,000, and we did solar on the property. So we had to pay off solar, which they were in second position. So it was like 25,000, 30,000, and then after closing costs and everything, we ended up with about 260,000, which is dollar for dollar what our duplex was going to cost us. So we're pretty close right there at the 260 mark. We're going to probably do a few more finishes, which will put us over that on our rooftop patio. But yeah, it's going to appraise pretty close to 2 million when we're all done.
Damn, dude, that's freaking badass. And then how much are you expecting to make off rents for those? Like, is your mortgage completely going to be covered? You're going to be cash flowing?
This was probably the best move I could have made. So the units, the 3-bedroom unit is 3,500. The 2-bedroom is 3,700. So let's just call it 7,000 and some change. And the mortgage is 3,900, not including taxes. So yeah, we've got a pretty good spread there. And the HELOC is about 2,500 a month, and we'll collect about 6,500 a month from those 2 units. So this one property is like, I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better scenario.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredible very first deal. What were the I mean, you talked about some of the biggest challenges and mistakes early on, but if someone was looking to do this for the first time, like what advice would you give them?
I think a lot of people look at properties right now and like they need to find this place that pencils and cash flows right away. It's really tough in this market to find something that cash flows right away. I really think the best move on this place was to build a unit. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have an opportunity to do FHA primary occupancy and get in at 3.5% down, no matter where you go or what you buy, it's the easiest way to get into the market. And then you can build from there. Multifamily is a long road. I didn't know that at first, but you're going to tie up a lot of cash and you're going to be in the property, but you're going to make money. You know, you got
Mm-hmm.
3, 4, 5 years before it really kicks over, but then you're making a pretty good chunk of change to help move and buy. So they say when you have real estate, it's easier to buy real estate. And it's kind of a learning lesson, but buy a house. If you can add value by building a unit, do it. You'll be able to increase your equity a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. So just find a really big lot. And what was that process like? Getting all the permitting and all that stuff. I know San Diego is pretty supportive of all this stuff, but was it a pain in the ass to try and do?
There's a lot of horror stories, man. Like it takes a year to get a place permitted. If you stay within the guidelines and the unit size and you're not building some like monstrosity, our permit process took 4.5 months. So it was pretty smooth. So between the permit process and the construction process, we're a little less than a year. I couldn't ask for a better scenario.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. That's
It was
great. Yeah.
expensive. I mean, it cost us like $28,000 before we even broke ground.
Yeah. It's great that San Diego and California. I mean, there's just such a big shortage of housing that everyone. I think even in San Jose, they're really pushing to build ADUs. And so I think if you can find a place like that that is supportive and pushes permits and all that stuff, it'd be awesome. And I think ADUs is a huge play right now.
I couldn't agree more. I think ADUs is a relatively easy way to break the mold of getting into multifamily without the multifamily price tag. You're going to be able to
Mm-hmm.
build a unit a lot less than you could buy, 4 units. Buy 2,
Yeah.
build 2 more, and you're going to have a really quality asset. I think some people are going a little crazy on the ADU market as far as density in small areas, and I think working with large multifamily, you learn kind of the urban structure and the master plan and like road structures and sidewalks and curbs and, stormwater and some of the areas that we're going to and seeing these ADUs going up. It's, 15 units, no parking in
Mm-hmm.
like a more neighborhood base. And like, I couldn't agree more that there's ADUs needed, but I'm curious to see what happens in the next 5 years with some of these like higher dense areas and what it's going to do to the supporting structure around it.
Yeah, that'd be pretty annoying to be living in an area for a really long time and then just imagine seeing like a 5-story building go right up behind your house and not being able to see anything other than just like your neighbors showering.
Yeah, 100%. And like, just think like no parking, you've got 15 units. And unfortunately, this is not a walkable city. So you got 15 cars likely, and let's just say half. I mean, the whole neighborhood in front of your house is going to be covered in cars,
Hmm.
which I mean,
Yeah.
to each his own. And some areas are evolving. I think there's like North Park wasn't always that way, and North Park is now becoming a much more dense area, so it's starting to fit in. So some of these neighborhood areas are getting, 10 units, 15 units. Some of them are like 35, 40 units. But as the density has grown to the area, it's started to like mold and fit in. So it's not as bad in those areas.
Yeah. Well, so we talked about your first deal. What's your second deal? Is your second one the short-term rentals in Morro Bay?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a killer little property. It was on Zillow for one day. Actually, all everything I bought was on Zillow on market. Um, I think the off market stuff is can be deceiving. I think a lot of times you see these lists on off market and you're like, oh shit, this is going to be a good deal. And it ends up being like what list price would be anyways. It's just off
Yep.
market.
Hmm.
But yeah, Morro Bay was that property was on Zillow for a day and we had an offer in same day. We bought that one for 730. Two little tiny units, like 350 square feet, but they overlooked the rock there in Morro Bay, which is like the symbol and the landmark that everybody loves there. It's partial to me. When I was bringing my boat down from Portland, I actually lost steering, was taking on a little bit of water, and that was the closest port. So I had a lot of interactions with the Coast Guard and we made it in. And so like, I kissed the dock there and went and got hammered to relieve a little stress from that situation. Got to know Morro Bay really well. I was there for about a week and I really loved it. I knew that I was going to own something there eventually. And just happened to be that it popped up. And that's actually where we're looking to potentially build a hotel is in that area.
Nice. And what made you want to do more of the short-term route versus the single long-term family route that you're doing with your first property?
I would, it fits the area, right? There's a lot of hotels there, and not everybody wants to stay in a hotel, which
Hmm.
looking at an area where there's a lot of hotels, maybe Airbnb is not the best play. But we have a kitchen and a bedroom, and so it actually offers something that they don't, and it's a hit. And those things are booked all the time. I don't know that I love short-term rental for me. Um, I think they make pretty good money, but I would prefer to either be hospitality or long-term rental
Hmm.
in a perfect world. And maybe a mix, maybe one or two units of an 8 unit or something like that, short term. But yeah, does well. I
Yeah,
just I just don't love it.
I've seen pictures of your properties. I mean, everything looks extremely beautiful. What made you really want to go into the hotels? Was it just scale, easyability for
That's what it
that?
was. Like, I mean, the short-term rental in itself, like the way that it is killer. But what I don't love is the fact that there's only 2 units there. I would rather be and jump the scale and go hospitality where we have 10 to 15 units and or a little bit more because you got maintenance guy, you got cleaners and economy and scale, we only have 2 units. So we don't necessarily
Hmm.
have like our cleaner's killer. She does a lot of stuff. But I would rather have somebody a little bit more under our umbrella that we can grow. And then same thing with marketing and it's a business. You have 15 units. It's now a business rather than just 2 units short-term rental. Um, the hospitality play just looks like it's a lot more appealing.
Hmm.
Unless
Yeah,
I
so
was
for
to
me, for
go
me
the other
too.
direction and just grow more Airbnbs, but hospitality, yeah, looks a lot more appealing.
Yeah, I love hospitality. I mean, I love traveling, and I love the feeling that you get when you just stay in a really nice hotel. I love the feelings that you get when they're super detailed. There, you walk into a hotel, there's like balloons everywhere. They say "Welcome," "Happy Birthday," whatever it may be. Make it really personalized. And hotels are just kind of sexy, honestly. I think it's just a lot more appealing than multifamily. So I think
I
that's just one of
100%
my
agree.
biggest. Yeah, that's one of my biggest draws to them. So what
And
kind of hotel? Sorry, go ahead.
there's like the fact of like, Airbnb used to be a little bit cheaper. You and a buddy or you and your gal could go stay in an Airbnb and it was cost effective and it made sense. Now it's not so much. Airbnb is pretty expensive altogether, which I can
Hmm.
appreciate on my end, but on the, user side, maybe not the most cost effective method for just like a couple nights stay, right? But a
Hmm.
hotel, man, it's nice. You got a clean bed all the time. They come in and take care of the place. They're very welcoming. Um, yeah, it's a different vibe, and everywhere has a different opportunity, right? Like some places I go, I don't want to stay in a hotel. Some places Airbnb is killer, but likely I'm staying in a hotel.
Yeah. So, what kind of hotels are you looking to acquire? Like size wise, are you looking to purchase something totally ground up? Are you looking to do something that's tired and run down that you can make operations better, renovate, force appreciation?
So I was in escrow on two different properties, one in Reedsport, Oregon, and one here in Southern California. And the the rundown property play is killer. When I was looking at construction cost, because we own a construction company, I was starting to see the cost of construction versus cost to build was pretty comparable within $1 million. And I say that loosely, but $1 million on a $800,000 renovation, I'd rather build it,
Hmm.
for a couple $1 million versus buying one for a couple $1 million. I have an opportunity to do that. And so right now we're looking for a couple acre property in the Central Coast from like Carmel to Morro Bay. And I just love the area. It's super desirable. Everybody loves going there. It's right off the 101. And building something that's kind of like a hybrid. Um, my idea right now is 10 units combined and another 5 units separated, so experiential. Um, and having the other couple acres groomed by somebody that has a hobby farm for wine. They can come there and maintain it, and they get to use the land, but we get to use their landscaping. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like, as long as they're maintaining the property and the wine and the grapes, that's really what we're after right now. It's kind of, we get to jump in on that, but we also get a mix between both styles of units.
Yeah. Are you looking to purchase something that has all the entitlements and all that already? Are you okay getting a piece of land, going through all the entitlements and everything, even though it's a long term play?
My initial thought was buy it, start over from scratch. The problem in those areas is water restrictions are so, so tough. So when it comes to, meter size and water allocation, you are better off buying something that had units there and
Hmm.
upgrading versus trying to get allocation of water from nothing. So we pivoted. We were looking at zoning in all these areas that allowed the density that we wanted and the type of property that we wanted. But we ultimately decided to find something that was ran down that we can expand. And just like we did with the property in San Diego, buying a couple units and building a few more. That way, maybe we can cover some of the expenses on the property during the process of entitlement as well.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, there can be so many high uh, costs to like holding costs when you're just purchasing a property, and so I think there's definitely value in getting something that's already zoned properly, entitled property, and has all the things in place like utilities and water, like you said. Because if you're buying a really expensive property and they have to go through years and years for waiting for all these things to come through, that could potentially be, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars before you even make a dollar.
Yeah, it's a long-term play with a lot of liquidity for sure. I mean,
Hmm.
you're either buying cash because financing raw land is extremely difficult. You're putting 40% down in some of these cases, if not more. Interest rates aren't super great for raw land either.
Hmm.
So if you have an opportunity to, yeah, buy something and just go from there, it's so much easier. The holding cost is something that's extremely overlooked. You got a monthly mortgage, you got interest rate. It could be an interest only mortgage, so you're not paying down anything. You're just going full speed ahead, and then you got to refinance at the end.
Hmm. What's the biggest piece of advice that for someone who's looking to get in hotels but doesn't have any experience with short-term rentals or single family? Do you think it's possible to go straight to hotels, or do you think they have to start with something smaller first?
I think it's very possible to go straight to hotels and, not have any experience in Airbnb, but not having experience running any type of business, I would not recommend going into buying hotels. I think one thing people don't understand about buying anything is it is a business. You're going to spend a lot of hours spinning your wheels and learning. You're going to have mistakes that are going to be expensive from time to time, and it's just part of doing business. You need to be prepared to put sweat equity in and learn and pay money to learn. Like get into a room and get into a mastermind or get into an education area where other people are doing what you want to do and educate yourself as much as possible and leverage their experience. So that way you can kind of bypass some of the possible issues that you might run into and
Mm-hmm.
then fall into place. But as long as you have the understanding that if you're going to go into a hotel, I don't personally own one, but what I can see from all of these other hotel operators and the experience that I'm seeing is it is a business and you need to be prepared to run this business successfully. It is an
Mm-hmm.
asset, it is a hotel, and there is a, experience factor that needs to be put in there. But yeah, ultimately it's a business. And it could be done
Yeah.
very, very well as long as you have the understanding of it.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more. Put yourself in these rooms, surround yourself with other people who are doing the things that you want to do, and bring as much value as possible, and just continue to learn from everyone, and treat it like a business, like you said. I think that's one thing that scares me is I think getting the asset is the easy part, but actually running the business and doing it successfully and stabilizing it and doing it over these 3 to 5 years or however long you plan to hold it, that's honestly what scares me the most. And so I think being able to partner with other people who have experience is probably the most valuable thing.
Yeah, I mean, as we're told, find somebody that's experienced in the area that you're not, leverage the two and work together and make a well-oiled machine. And that's just the same in business. If you're a great salesman, you're not going to be great at all the admin work. So you're going to need to find somebody there that helps on the operational side of things. Same thing in the hotel, like what you mentioned.
Yeah. So you're juggling multiple businesses. How do you structure your days or weeks and so that you're able to be so productive and not just be having your mind go in so many different directions at all the time?
It's still a challenge, but what I try to do is front load my week. And pick certain days that I do things. I pick a couple days a week that I'm just going to spend in the office and I just don't do anything else. I don't leave this place. I focus primarily on any estimates, expansion, operational stuff, finances in those few days. And then I pick a couple days that are just purely, checking on a job or working with a job or going on meetings. That's what I have found to work the best. It doesn't always work that way, but as long as I structure my days like that, I don't get railroaded or sidetracked too bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, front loading your week and time blocking has been super helpful for me. I have a hard time focusing my attention and just switching tasks for like doing like 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there. And so like I work in the hospital and I have some downtime sometimes, but like even when I'm at the hospital with downtime, I just can't, for me personally, I just can't switch gears and do other things. Like when I'm at the hospital, I'm at the hospital. And when I'm
Yeah.
at home, like that's when I do real estate stuff.
Yeah. I mean, going and to relate to kind of what you're saying as far as I mean, that's high stress as well, like being as a nurse or working in a hospital. I can't necessarily go from walking to a job site, taping lines, checking out things, and then go right back to the office and power through an estimate. Your mode isn't the same, and having that meshing gear really helps. So if you're not distracted throughout the day and you're going to work on the computer, great. I also, I mean, ADHD, man, my mind is all over the place. I also use alarms. So I have this little timer that I put on my desk and I'll set for 30 minutes. And if I see it, I'm cognitive about it. I mean, like, oh shit, I
Mm.
got 28 more minutes. And then I just make sure that I'm focusing on what I'm trying to do. And it helps. I mean, it's kind of quirky, but I definitely like that little timer.
Yeah, love it. So near the end of the show, I just got some rapid fire questions really quick. What's your favorite hotel or experience that you've had as far as hospitality?
Oh, shoot, man. Um, Favorite hotel. I would have to say is Paradise Village in Puerto Vallarta. It was just pretty cool. They had all kinds of shit there. Um, Little zoo action, pools, all the things.
Okay. What else made it so special? Is it all inclusive resort? Is it
Yeah,
a
that one was
boutique
all
hotel?
inclusive. It was like the bigger resort type deal, and I don't go to large like all inclusive resorts all the time. Um,
Hmm.
Not my jam, but that one was just really neat. It was a blast.
Got it. Okay. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's stuck in a job they do not like?
If you're stuck in a job you don't like, um, hyper focus and find out exactly what you do like. I mean, if you're a video gamer, if you're a artist, or anything that you do like and you feel comfortable with your passion, learn it, educate yourself on everything that's around it, and jump into that particularly.
Hmm.
Don't do
Gold.
shit you don't like. Life's too short, man. Most of your days
Yeah.
are spent doing work. So
Yep. I know. I couldn't agree more. I'm always trying to just probe people who I work with. I mean, I'm always like, what's next for you? Do you want to do this for another 20 years? Which there's nothing wrong with that. I think people need to be doing these things. I mean, there's definitely many jobs that people need to be doing all the time, but I think there's just this mentality that we have in society that, it's just a job. I'm gonna treat it as a job, which I think is I agree with to a certain extent, but I also think that you really got to find something that you're passionate about.
100% agree. And as far as about people working in industries for 20 years, like we need that. We need people that are good at what they do in all types of facets. Not everyone is built to run a business. Like, end
Mm-hmm.
of story. I swear 90% of the time I hear everybody push, get a business, start a business, do all these things. And it's not as easy as it sounds. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. There's a lot of sweat equity that goes into owning a business. But man, if you find something you like, whether it is being self-employed or W-2, it just makes life so much easier to just be good at what you're doing and feel valuable, that whatever you're doing is contributing to whatever you want to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more. Well, if you had to start all over again from scratch, knowing what you know now with only $50,000, what would you do first?
I would get into a room with people, whatever I liked doing, right? And I would get into a room with them, whether it's a mastermind or education course, and leverage the experience that's there, right? That might be 5,000, might be 10,000. And then I would take the rest of that money and figure out how I can allocate to buy property with it or buy whatever it is that I'm going to do. I would make sure that I keep a proportion for liquidity and cash to run whatever it is I need to do. And if it's buying a property and scaling from there, I would take 30,000 and do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Invest in yourself first. That's the most important thing you can do. Learn as much as you can, get in the right rooms, and from there, take action.
100%.
Well, Nick, how can the listeners get a hold of you?
Instagram, man, at NL Rossi.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. Nick Rossi, thank you so much. I appreciate you for being on. Everyone, I hope you found value. As always, keep growing, keep taking action, and we will see you on the next one. Peace.
There we go.